like that's what
I saw y'all on and I was like,
yes, I know.
The government set about doing this.
Like they were gonna make a rounds. We knew it was like we
A
would
lot
have
of neighborhoods are saying, well, this is one of the more integrated cities I've ever seen, but still, regarding the school,
they got people that
I
didn't
didn't
count.
always feel that problem.
Which might be better, I don't know.
that
Like,
happened
I
to
don't know
us.
about that. But so like we went with, we rated all of them super well. We rated all of them super well. And then in our conversation, we made it clear to the preference that there's that one. So in our conference.
Right, that's where you see it. Junior high, high school,
Good morning, everybody. We'll get started in just a second. So my name is Scott Goldstein, Executive Director of Empower Ed DC. Thank you guys all for coming today to this press conference. We brought together a really incredibly diverse coalition of DC education advocates, education and civil rights organizations, to talk about a really important process that's about to begin with regards to the search for the new DCPS Chancellor and Deputy Mayor for Education. It's been over a decade since the 2007 education reforms that changed the landscape of education in Washington, D.C., and without a doubt, we've made progress in many areas. Many of our schools have been modernized, we've expanded access to pre-K, teacher pay has been raised to help us attract excellent teachers to our public schools, and there are truly amazing things happening in our schools every day, especially from the incredibly dedicated educators and support staff that work in our school buildings. We shouldn't ignore the great progress that has been made in so many of our schools, and likewise, we can't ignore the enormity of the work that's left to be done. The fact is that yearly scores on the NAACP exams were rising faster in the several years before reforms were implemented than they have in the years since. Despite gains among many subgroups in standardized tests, our achievement and opportunity gaps have actually grown since 2007. Teacher and principal turnover is at a crisis level in both DCPS and the charter sector. And our evaluation system has created a culture of fear that contributed to many of the controversies, especially regarding attendance and graduation that we saw over this past year. Furthermore, our schools remain deeply segregated, and punitive approaches to discipline have yet to be replaced by a systematic commitment to restorative practices. While we have increasing school and curricular choices, inequalities remain, and many neighborhoods do not have strong matter-of-right paths from pre-K all the way to 12th grade. So for all of those reasons, an approach that advocates simply staying the course would mean accepting racial and economic disparities in our city. And that's something that we simply can't do. As Mayor Bowser begins the process of selecting a new DCPS Chancellor and Deputy Mayor for Education, we have a rare opportunity to have a full, open, and public conversation about the direction of education in our city with a diverse array of stakeholders. That's why we've joined together with this incredibly diverse coalition of advocates to call on the mayor to lead a transparent and inclusive search for the next DCPS Chancellor and Deputy Mayor for Education, and lay out a positive, constructive agenda for both building on our successes and making smart, necessary mid-course corrections in our education strategies. Chairman of the Education Committee, David Grasso, has called in 2 letters on the mayor to do just that, lead an open and transparent search. We join him in that call for an inclusive process and a real culture shift in our schools. So as we begin discussing this new direction, I just wanted to say a little bit about an organization, an issue that my organization, Empower Ed, holds dear and works to change, and that is teacher turnover. For the last decade, I've taught in this city. I have firsthand experience both in charter schools and in DCPS. And I've witnessed firsthand the effect of teacher turnover on students themselves. And DCPS often points to the retention of our highly effective educators as a determining factor in why the impact teacher evaluation system has been a success. But sharp inequities remain. In our high poverty, high need schools, our lowest performing schools, 33% of teachers are leaving each year. In DCPS, and 2/3 of the charter schools have turnover that's over 20%, with 20% of charter schools having over 40% turnover on a year-to-year basis. That turnover is well above average for similar urban districts. And I want to speak to just the fact that this is, for me, a very moral issue. So I grew up in a suburban district in suburban Philadelphia in New Jersey. And it could be expected and anticipated by students where I went to school that there would be teachers who had been there since your parents had attended that school, who were there for 20 to 25 years. They had deep, trusting relationships with their students. And I think it's a moral failure on our part that our students in DC can't say the same thing. That they have deep, committed, lasting relationships with teachers who they know will be there from the time they are in kindergarten through their education experience, from the time they get into high school as a freshman to the time that they graduate. And Committee Member Grasso just held a town hall the other day, and one thing that every single student brought up, right, was the importance of having relationships with educators that last. We don't have that right now, and that's a sign that we need to make some corrections. So, too many of us who are educators in the classroom have heard that really heartbreaking line, which is, you're not going to be here next year anyway, and it's simply not acceptable that we can't change that in our education community. These students need these positive adult role models. They need it not only for the curriculum that they teach and the content they teach in classes. They need those role models as positive adult figures in their life for many students who don't have that at home. They need that for access to college. They need that for recommendations. They need that for their future careers. So this is an issue that we have to make progress on. So together, we can address the challenges and promote all that's going well in our schools at the same time as having an honest conversation about what needs to change and making those mid-course corrections. So today we'll lay out our views for you on a positive agenda that's broadly shared for broadly shared success in DC schools. And we hope the mayor will meet with us and this coalition and all these important stakeholders as we begin this important process. So I now want to introduce Marcus Batchelor, who is the Ward 8 State Board of Education representative.
Good morning, everyone. So again, my name is Marcus Batchelor, and I have the pleasure of representing over 16,000 students across over 40 public and public charter school communities in Ward 8. And I'm really proud today to join Scott in this coalition of advocates, of educators, of concerned citizens who want to ensure that the process for the selection of our next Chancellor and Deputy Mayor for Education are both transparent and reflective of the values of our residents. As all of you know, this is a critical time for our system with the controversies around attendance and graduation, with the challenges around teacher turnover, leader turnover, our wide achievement gaps, our stagnated growth. Now more than ever in our system, we need leaders that the community has confidence in, leaders that have a firm understanding of the challenges, and more importantly, a vision for the work ahead that's deeply informed by those most acutely impacted. And I dare say that those are students, families, and educators. I believe that the shift in the typical process that we've seen for a chancellor selection must also mirror the shift we need in culture at DCPS. A culture that's less bureaucratic, less insular, and more open to the diverse voices of our city, that's less dictated by political calculation and more dependent on collective community effort and buy-in. Now more than ever, we need this process for the selection of our next Chancellor and next Deputy Mayor for Education to be more transparent, not less. We need more engagement. We need less people plucked from the halls of favor and influence to lead and dictate checkbox engagement efforts. We need more meaningful engagement and great weight given to educators, families, and advocates who have the greatest stake in our system's success. And as we know, the legislation associated with the selection of the Chancellor gives a very firm and very explicit roadmap for how to accomplish all of these goals, but for too long, this administration and administrations past have tried its hardest to fall within the letter of the law without following the spirit of the law. And so we hope that this time will be different in a time so critical for our system. We hope that this time our leaders in this city will reach out to those who know our system best. So many in this room and so many across the city who have a great stake in its future, and who will and are the experts that can select a leader that will finally address honestly so many of the challenges we face and work with our community to solve them in a proactive and collective way. So again, I'm happy to be here today. We hope that the mayor and later the council will work closely with members of this coalition, with me and my colleagues on the State Board of Education, and with all of our residents to ensure that we make the right choice, and that not only will this shift in leadership precipitate just someone new at the top, but a new way of doing public education in this city, which is so desperately needed. So thank you.
Thanks, Marcus. So now I'm going to bring up Allison Kreiner-Brown, who is with the organization Teaching for Change.
Thanks, Scott, and good morning, everyone. My name is Allison Kreiner-Brown, and this is Zora. She's 2 months old today. I'm the Associate Director of Teaching for Change. I'm also here as a DCPS parent, a voter, and a resident east of the Anacostia River. Teaching for Change is a DC-based nonprofit whose mission is to provide teachers and parents with the tools to create schools where students learn to read, write, and change the world. Here in DC, our projects include the DC Area Educators for Change, a network of social justice-minded pre-K through 12 educators, Teach the Beat, bringing go-go into DC music and social studies classrooms, Teaching Central America, and Telling Stories, our nationally recognized approach to family engagement that partners directly with DCPS schools. We believe that schools offer the highest quality education when they are academically rigorous, participatory, culturally affirming, equitable, liberating, and connected to the community. With roots in this community that stretch back more than 25 years, and with the teachers and parents that we serve in mind, we endorse the open letter to Mayor Bowser and to the DC Council regarding the process for selecting a new Deputy Mayor for Education, DCPS Chancellor, and comments about the direction of public education in the District of Columbia. With my short time, I will draw attention and emphasis to several key points. First, all students deserve a neighborhood public school of exceptional quality that is a matter of right, not just choice. The district, particularly the next DME and DCPS Chancellor, must focus on investments and strategies that build equity and excellence in DC public schools, and particularly those that are on the front lines of poverty, serving lower income Black and brown families. Second, the process must at a minimum follow the process outlined in the PERAA legislation with an emphasis on transparency and meaningful community engagement. Others will speak to this in more detail. Third, the path forward for the next DME, and particularly the next DCPS Chancellor, must pursue a rich, broad curriculum that is engaging, focuses on the whole child, and helps children make critical connections between their lives, their world, and what they learn in the classroom. Finally, we amplify support for meaningful family and community engagement, equitable funding in schools, supports for schools to address and eliminate discipline disparities, and expanding community schools as a strategy to support students and families. So thank you, and along with my colleagues, I'm happy to answer any questions as the time allows.
Thank you to both of you. Next speaker is Kent Withicombe, who is with the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs.
Thanks, Scott. My name is Kent Withicombe. I'm the Education Project Director at the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs. And I want to acknowledge we have Jonna Turner here, who's with our Parent Empowerment Program. We build up parent community, especially DCPS Title I schools. And we have Eleanor Hart here, who's been working for decades and with the School Partnership Program, where we bring in law firms and businesses to work with our school communities, focusing on DCPS Title I schools. I want to kind of bring this together a little bit. Martin Luther King often quoted Yeats on the purpose of education, although Plutarch likely said it first. Education is not the filling of a pail. It's the lighting of a fire. And we need a chancellor and a DME who truly get that. We have to allow our teachers to inspire students through project-based, learner-centered explorations rather than drill them on English and math tests. If we focus on that lodestar of what great education is, we'll make more progress in closing the opportunity gap that still divides students of color and students from low-income neighborhoods from wealthier students in the same district. All of our students deserve deep exposure to science, technology, art, music, foreign languages, and athletics, not just those who have well-funded PTOs and have come from wealthy households. Further, that is what keeps students interested and excited about school. If they are, truancy will decrease, and it will make it easier for schools to comply with the new Student Fair Access to School Act, as there will be pressure on schools, or less pressure on schools, to suspend, exclude, or push out students with learning differences, or students of color, or those challenged by trauma and poverty. We need a chancellor and a DME fully committed to closing achievement and opportunity gaps. Further, as students of color are disproportionately affected by old school suspension practices, we need a chancellor and DME committed to implementing restorative justice for students and trauma-informed training for all school personnel as required and inspired really by the Student Fair Access to School Act. We need a chancellor and DME who will stop the cooking of graduation, suspension, and attendance books, as those scandals also disproportionately affect low-income students and students of color. Our new chancellor and DME must rectify the increasing segregation in our DC public schools. For example, African-American students in DC go to schools that are most African-American students go to schools that are more than 90% African-American. The mayor must listen to our school communities in the selection process. And our new chancellor and DME must pay attention to them too. And as Marcus said, not just check the box community engagement, real community engagement. They all must be attuned to how rapid gentrification is pushing people of color out of the neighborhoods where they have lived for generations, and how that is challenging so many school communities. We deal with that in our parent empowerment groups almost on a weekly basis. Finally, as a lottery system may never be fair or equitable, all of our neighborhood schools must be excellent choices. When they are, and affordable housing is available in all wards, the district can become a model for achieving the acquired vision of Brown versus Board of Education, a truly integrated and inspiring public education with vibrant and broadly supported school communities in every ward. And I'll take your questions after if that's necessary.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Finally, we're going to have Suzanne Wells in the Capitol Hill Public School Parent Organization.
So my name is Suzanne Wells. I'm the founder of the Capitol Hill Public Schools Parent Organization, and I have a daughter who attends Elliott Hine Middle School. Schools are sources of pride for communities, and we should believe every part of our city deserves strong, by right neighborhood schools. Every student should feel safe at their neighborhood school, challenged by what is taught, and excited to explore their potential outside of the classroom. Particularly at the elementary and middle school grades, students shouldn't have to travel long distances to go to a good school, and parents should never have to win a lottery to be sure their child gets a quality education. Today, we don't have strong neighborhood schools across our city. Our open letter identifies a path forward and provides concrete examples of proven ways to create strong schools. A stable staff of adults who care about the students and who the students trust, a rich curriculum focused on more than high-stakes test preparation, autonomy to allow individual schools to run themselves in ways that best meet their students' needs, and a willingness to honestly analyze data on what works and doesn't work so there can be continuous improvement. We ask the mayor to meet with us as she begins the search for a new chancellor and deputy mayor of education. We ask her to acknowledge some of the real problems facing our public school system and to be willing to chart a different path forward that will be student, family, and community focused.
Thanks, Suzanne, and thanks to to the whole coalition for being part of this. I just wanted to close on a few notes, and first of all mention the diversity of this coalition and the other folks who are not taking part in the press conference but signed on to this open letter. We talked about the Capitol Hill Public School Parent Organization, Citizens for Effective Schools, EducationDC.net, and Education Townhall, We Act Radio, Empower Ed, NAACP, who is represented here as well, Teaching for Change, Ward 1, 5, 7, and 8 Education Councils, the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs, and the Washington Teachers Union. So we're very grateful to all of these folks for having joined together behind not only calling for an open and transparent and inclusive process in the selection of the new DCPS Chancellor and Deputy Mayor, but also common priorities and a common agenda that we want to see going forward for those new leaders and for our schools. I want to reiterate that this is a very critical moment. A lot that's happened in the past year has drawn attention to some critical things going on in DC schools, and it is critical that we not lose this moment to have an open, transparent, and full conversation both about what's going right in our schools and where we need to make these mid-course corrections. There is broadly a need for a culture shift, something that emanates both from the cultures of DCPS and DC charter schools. And for all the folks who are working for DCPS and DC charter schools that we know with the best of intentions are doing absolutely incredible hard work every day to fight for our students, we also know that it's time for a transparent conversation about how we shift that culture and make sure that everybody is part of that conversation. And so that's why we've tried to bring together a very inclusive and diverse coalition to start that conversation today. We look forward to the mayor's remarks later today as that process begins, and we'll take some questions. Yeah.
You mentioned specifically we need to change course. Does that mean that you and the coalition, and I haven't read the full letter yet, are not in support of the interim chancellor being selected?
So we're not taking a position on who should be selected at this point and what names should be considered. I think what we want to see from anyone who's put up as a nominee is a commitment to the values that we've outlined here. And I think what you'll notice is chief among them is equity, right? There's several issues that we mentioned having to do with school integration and school diversity, having to do with restorative practices and punitive discipline approaches, having to do with turnover and how that disproportionately affects communities of color in schools where there's high poverty. So there is a common thread of equity here, and we want to make sure that whoever the new chancellor is and who gets nominated for that position and deputy mayor, that is a priority for them, that members of the city council are asking the questions to them about those issues.
And to piggyback off that, do you think you can change course with the current interim chancellor as chancellor, and you've had 6 months to kind of see what she's done? What do you all think of the, whatever experience you
I want to say, as folks answer questions, anyone feel free to join in. What I would say is, in terms of the interim chancellor, I think we've seen in some ways some of the things that have continued from the previous chancellor, and some of those were positive signs about a culture shift, and we want to see those things continue. I think there's certainly promising signs, but I think there's also issues that we feel like have not been talked about enough, some of the issues that we brought up today. So if the interim chancellor is committed to addressing those issues, we're absolutely open to hearing from her on how she plans to do that as well.
I'm Gary Ratner, the Executive Director and Founder of Citizens for Effective Schools, which is a national citizens school reform advocacy organization. The part of what the letter talks about, I think, in terms of the culture change is alluded to in the last paragraph. And it talks about the need, the current system is a top-down managed system, and it's also a system that focuses heavily on test scores and graduation rates, and that's been going on since the last 10, 11 years. This is the inheritance of the Rhee and Henderson period. So I think part of what this letter is calling for is a change in that culture to a system that is not top-down, but that is collaborative and that is not focused on tests and graduation rates, but is focused on teaching and learning, valuing the principals, valuing the teachers, valuing the parents. It's a different emphasis entirely. So that's changing the culture. So I don't think that with an interim chancellor who does not have a mandate to change the culture, that you're going to change the culture. I think first you need the conversation, and you need to have an agreement as to what changes are needed, which you lay out in the letter, then you need to have somebody who agrees with that and is capable of implementing and leading those kinds of changes.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
And I think one more thing I'll say is I think it's also important that not only do we get to have those conversations in an open forum, but that a representative group of Washingtonians also get to ask those questions to a wide array of candidates. You know, it's prescribed in para that there's supposed to be an advisory group that gets the resumes of multiple candidates, gets to consider them, gets to ask critical questions, and gets to make a recommendation to the mayor that has great weight. And I think one of the major concerns that we have is that, like I said, this will be another, you know, way to do checkbox engagement where we go out, have a couple forums, get some feedback on some worksheets that really never get, you know, paid attention to, and then the executive chooses who he or she wants anyway. And I think we've got to be confident that a representative group of Washingtonians who are deeply connected to these issues get a wide array of candidates to consider, so that they also can be confident that the best choice was made on behalf of the residents of the district.
Any other questions?
I don't understand. Everybody here is on the right side. I don't understand why this city didn't catch on fire when we learned that a third of the graduates did not qualify for it. Why didn't this city just become outraged? We need to get change. You all laid out what needs to be done, but until the pressure gets put on the mayor and the council, it's not gonna. We're gonna be having the same meeting again 3 or 4 years from now. Is there anybody here from the Washington Post? Yeah. The Post, in my opinion, one person's opinion, really misses the boat. They don't tell us and talk about it and really get excited about it, about the problems that we've got. The facts are so obvious. So I'd love to hear people who are knowledgeable.
Let me address your point briefly, because I think we have seen a shift, right, in the attention to those issues over the course of this year, and I'm grateful for all the press that was given to these issues and the spotlight that was put on those issues over the course of this year. And I think the journalism is why we're here, right, in the first place. The amazing work that's been done by WAMU, by the Post, by the City Paper, and others. And so I think journalism has shifted. I think there has been great attention to these issues. What I would say about your point is that what we want to make sure happens is that it's not only around the controversies, right, and the scandals, but that there's continuous follow-up. And I've seen great reporting in follow-up to many of these issues, paying a lot of attention to student voice and how that plays in to the issue, making sure that parents and community members are involved. And so the effort with this letter is to make sure that this conversation is an ongoing one, and that happens right now, because this is the critical moment to make sure that that conversation happens as we're searching for the new leadership for the city, and make sure that coverage continues into the positive work that has to be done. Okay.
Let me ask you this. Can you guys talk to me what you felt about the process with Chancellor Wilson?
Sure, and I think Marcus might be a good person to talk about that. I think there are several, and unfortunately, President Davis of WT was traveling this week, so I'll let Marcus comment on that process and what we want to see from this process.
Sure. So while I witnessed the process from the outside last time, I think that it's a pretty clear consensus, even to the folks who were closest to the process, that, like I said, it wasn't really done. I mean, some even argue whether it was done to the letter of the law, but I think most will tell you that they don't believe that it was done in the spirit of the law. I think, you know, several members of the committee, you know, only got one resume, and it was the resume of Antoine Wilson, and they got that resume literally minutes before he was announced as the choice, right? And so I think, you know, we can't be We can't do that anymore. The fact is, our chancellor has to have tremendous public confidence in order to get our communities to rally around our public schools again. And this is not just a matter of politics or perception or who looks good anymore. The leader of this, the leader of our public schools is literally going to determine whether or not our communities continue to have confidence in our public school system, and whether or not families will walk away permanently. And so we've really got to get this right this time. I mean, it's a very urgent matter, and if we don't, we really run the risk of handicapping a generation of public school students. And so we've got to get this right this time.
So we have time for about one more question, and I want to make sure that folks who covering the mayor's press conference as well. One more question.
Can I follow up my question?
Sure, briefly.
Yeah, why is it that the city, particularly the people in Ward 7 and 8, when the scandal, when we found out on Kojo Nambi, we didn't find out from people in the school world or leaders. We found out on a talk show. Why is it that this city doesn't get more angry about this?
So I would say that's part of the culture change that we're talking about, right? That it doesn't take the investigative reporting, right, of great journalists to make these things come to light, but it's part of the culture to be open and transparent, part of the culture to be inclusive in the process. And I think what you've seen in this coalition that's come together, not only do we have organizations from all 8 wards, but there are, I think now probably over 150 individual advocates that have signed on. That's growing. We'll be posting the letter publicly and on social media after this for even broader group to sign on. I think what you've seen in this process is there is wide consensus, right, from the community about what the priority should be. There are a lot of advocates engaged in the process, so folks want to be part of it. I think the grassroots energy for change is there, and to prop up and build our school system. But I think now we have to make sure there's a synergy between where our leadership is and where the advocacy community is.
Yeah. And also, could I just say, I think we've also got to think very critically as a community what institutional safeguards we have against that moving forward, right? The fact is, parents and families shouldn't learn about the flaws in their education system necessarily first from the news media. There should be stronger oversight over our school system. There should be more daylight in the information we get. There should be a broader array of data that's reported honestly, that's used as a flashlight and not a hammer against frontline employees. Again, we're talking about a culture shift that has to happen in our system, and one of the pieces of that shift is the way we share information with the folks most acutely impacted by it. So we've got to do a lot better job at that. And that's why this selection is so important, because we need a chancellor who's going to be committed to that type of openness. And I think if we allow the community and we allow these stakeholders to be a part of that process, we'll select that person.
And I just want to thank you, Marcus. I just want to close out and just to also mention our gratitude towards the majority of city council members who have already responded favorably to this letter, saying they share our concerns and share the agenda and want to meet on this and be part of that process for the chancellor and deputy mayor. So we're very grateful that we've had a diverse array of council members already respond very favorably to this, and we look forward to those meetings, and we hope the mayor will meet with this coalition as well and begin a very inclusive process. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. I'm excited to be here. And I bet you like in passing.
I was at the Ward E.
Okay, yes.
And my kids kept on.